Okay, if you are listening, you should be expecting a brief lecture on Oedipus Rex, the first Greek tragedy that we are reading in this course. If you are reading this, or listening to this, I should say, and have not yet read the PowerPoint that gives some basic history of Greek tragedy, you should pause this lecture and look at that PowerPoint. It's only 12 slides long, but it will give you some relevant background on tragedies in general, both historical, when these would have been performed, what the chorus is doing in these plays, and that's some important information that you're going to want listening to this. Second, if you're listening to this, you should have your copy of Oedipus Rex in front of you. We're going to be going through this text, not in super detail, but we are going to be taking a look at some passages just to give you some examples of where we're seeing some of our big themes of this play coming out. We'll talk about those in a second before we look at particular passages. First of all, just a little bit of background on the play Oedipus Rex, if you couldn't garner the story itself from the play. Oedipus Rex by Sophocles is the first of what are called the three Theban plays, Theban. Again, if you read the PowerPoint, you would know that oftentimes, almost always, these plays were written in groups of three. Over time in history, due to a variety of events, most of these trilogies we don't have all three plays of. Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone is one of those few collections that we do have all three of. We also have all three plays of the Oresteia by Aeschylus, but we're only going to read one of those. We're going to read the first and third plays in the Oedipus Rex trilogy. Now, although Oedipus Rex is the one that comes first chronologically, it is one of the last ones written in that trilogy. They were not written in order or presented in order. So, what is this play about? Now, if you read already, which you really should have read this entire play already, you would know, maybe, what some of this play is about. But just in case you don't, let me give you some background. The story of Oedipus Rex is that his parents went to an oracle, to find out their son's fate. They were king and queen of Thebes. They wanted to know what was going to happen to him. And the oracle told them that their child would kill its father and marry his mother. Out of fear, King Laius and Queen Jocasta had one of their servants take the child out into the woods, pierce his ankles, and leave him to die, rather than them bloodying their own hands because they're the king and queen. They couldn't be expected to do that sort of thing. The servant was supposed to kill the child, but he just pierced its ankles and left it to die. A shepherd finds it, gives it to the king and queen of the place that he lives, and Oedipus grows up to a young man. He goes to an oracle, finds out this same prophecy that he is supposed to kill his father and marry his mother, and he decides to leave his home because he has never been told that he is adopted. As he is traveling, he encounters a group of 4 men on a narrow road. He gets into a fight with them, kills them. Unbeknownst to him, one of those men is, lo and behold, his father, King Laius. He travels to Thebes, where he encounters a creature called the Sphinx, who has been plaguing Thebes with her riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? The story goes that any man who can solve the riddle will destroy the Sphinx, and his prize will be to become the new king, because the king has gone missing, and will take the queen as its bride. No men have been able to solve this riddle, but Oedipus is able to figure out that it is a human being. When we are babies, we crawl. When we are spry young adults in the afternoons of our lives, we walk on 2 feet. And when we get old in the evening or the twilight of our lives, we use a cane, thus 3 feet. So, he solves the riddle, becomes the new king of Thebes, marries Queen Jocasta. They have children, 4 of them, and we get to where we are. The problem at the outset of Oedipus Rex is that there's a plague on Thebes, and they go to the oracle of Apollo, find out that in order to make this plague go away, they need to solve the murder of King Laius. Oedipus insists on doing that. When he discovers that it is he, through various witness accounts and circumstances, he comes to understand that he was the one who killed his own father and thus married his mother and had children with her. And as a result, he pokes his own eyeballs out, banishes himself, and that is how the play ends. So there's your story in 5 minutes or less. Now, the reason that all of this is presented in some capacity throughout this play, but the thing is, the reason that we don't get a really lengthy, here's what's going on, is because the people that would have been listening to this play during the competition at the festival of Dionysus would have known this background. They would have already known the story of Oedipus Rex. Most of these playwrights were writing plays that are simply about stories that have already been written. So what's happening that we want to know is, why do people care about these plays? What were these playwrights trying to do? They're retelling a story that already exists. Most of the time, these are not new tales. So they're trying to do something thematically with these stories. And what are they looking at? So what I want to do is I want to just go through some of the pages of this play. We're not going to look at every line because that would take forever. We're not going to look at every page because that would take forever. But show you some spots that demonstrate some of the important elements of this play. So I have the Dover Thrift Edition, and unfortunately that does not come with line numbers. So I'm going to be using page numbers. So hopefully the version you have is paginated similarly. Obviously, you can take a moment if you need to pause the lecture to try to find it. You know, if you figure out how uncalibrated your version might be, so that you can follow along. Okay, so we open with the scene before the royal palace at Thebes. Enter Oedipus, to him the priest of Zeus and inhabitants of Thebes, meaning those people sort of wander up to him. Okay, we obviously start with Oedipus. The first thing that's important to know here is a term that we haven't seen yet, and that is called hubris. Hubris. This is the notion of deadly pride. When a character believes that he or she, but usually he, sorry fellas, is untouchable or is very proud. And we see this very early on with Oedipus. He starts talking about how great he is, and we're going to see this all over the place. So in this first bit, we've got, I have come hither, I myself have come hither, Oedipus, known far and wide by name. So he's boasting about who he is and how important he is. And so what most of this first page is doing, first 2 pages, so if we turn to page 2, is we're setting up the story. Again, most people would have known this story already. So, you know, we only get a little bit about the Sphinx midway through page 2. The toll we paid of a hard sorceress, we do get an asterisk for the Sphinx if you've got the same edition as I do. And that without instruction or advice of our imparting, but of heaven it came, thou art named and known our life's establisher. Thee, therefore, Oedipus, the mightiest head among us all we thy supplicants, blah, 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 blah. Throughout the section, we're getting word of what's going on at the moment. So, one thing we do find out, and this is all from the priest, is that Oedipus has been a good leader. You know, he says, never let us remember of thy rule, that we stood once erectly and then fell, but built this city in stability. So he did do a good job of returning stability to his people. So Oedipus actually does know what he's doing. So what we're going to see throughout is Oedipus's pride, which is going to be very ironic, which I'll talk about in a second. But he has been a good leader. So he has a reason to be proud of himself. He has a reason to be boastful and to believe that he's done well. One thing we're also going to see throughout this play is irony spewing out of everywhere. You know, we're going to hear, Oedipus is going to be talking about a lot of things, about knowledge and truth. And that ties into the sense of irony that we get in this play. So we get our first bit of irony on page 3 when Oedipus says, "You are all sick, I know it, and in your sickness there is not one of you so sick as I." Now this is ironic considering what we know happens at the end. All these people feel destroyed by this plague. Oedipus says, "None of you are plagued as much as I am." He has no idea that the reason for this is, well, he's the one causing everything, and he suffers the worst fate of anybody by the time the play is over. And then he does make a promise that he will destroy the person who has caused this plague. One other very interesting character throughout here is Creon. He's going to appear again when we get to Antigone, and he becomes a very complex character there. Right now, he is the brother of Jocasta. He's Jocasta's brother. Oedipus' uncle, but he doesn't know that yet. And a lot of people have some very bad things to say about Oedipus, which is not particularly fair. Or sorry, not about Oedipus, about Laius. Not Laius, about Creon. They say that he is power hungry, he's prideful, that he has a short temper, but these are all really things that he has in reaction to what Oedipus is doing. You'll notice several times throughout this play that Oedipus picks fights with Creon for no real good reason. And Creon even says, "Why are you getting mad at me? I'm doing what you told me to do." And so that gives... So we should be kind to Creon, is essentially what we need to think here. So we get this conversation at the beginning. This is the start of Oedipus trying to sort out the mystery of who killed Laius. So these next couple pages are mostly plots. We're not going to go through them. But we'll look at some things that Creon says a little later. Now, I do want to draw your attention on page 6 to where our chorus first enters. So the chorus is a very unique creature, put that in quotation marks, creature, in Greek theater. As the initial PowerPoint said, the chorus has a variety of roles. Oftentimes, they take on the same gender as the main character. So here they are Theban senators, the men. As we'll see in Medea in next week's unit, because she is the main character, the chorus is a bunch of women. But the chorus takes on a variety of roles, and we see those starting here. So first of all, we've got an invocation to the gods. "O prophecy of Jove, whose words are sweet, with what doom art thou sent to glorious Thebes from Pythos' gilded seat?" So we're asking the gods directly. You should remember this a little bit from Hesiod, who invoked the muses. So it's not the muses this time, but we're getting the chorus speaking directly to the gods, making a question to the gods. In large, bold Roman numeral 2, we see the plot. Again, this is where we see the chorus doing one of its tasks of establishing plot. "Woe, for unnumbered are the ills we bear, sickness pervades our hosts, nor is there any spear of guardian care, wherewith a man might save us, found in all our coasts." Blah, blah, blah. We're just getting descriptions of what's going wrong. They do say the plague is coming from the gods in big Roman numeral 3, letter 1. That it's the gods that are doing this, and that they need to figure out what's going on. Now, one thing, this is a very particular thing, the very last line of the chorus's speech on the bottom of page 8. They say, "Draw near and light thy torch of pine." One thing we're going to see throughout this is the notion of light and dark. Knowledge versus ignorance. This is a motif. And by motif, we simply mean a phrase or word or some image that keeps coming up, and lightness and darkness will come up several times. Similarly, we'll see knowledge and truth, what the difference between those are. On page 9, in Oedipus' next big speech, in about the middle of the page, we've got, "I bid that man show the whole truth to me, for he shall suffer no disparagement, except to quit the land unscathed." Oedipus is searching for the truth. One thing people accuse Oedipus of, and I've already done it, is of being prideful. Other people have also accused him of asking too many questions. He has this insatiable desire, this insatiable thirst to know the truth. This is a bit of an odd thing to find to be a flaw. This comes up when I ask people, what do you think Oedipus' greatest flaw is? And they say sometimes, well, he won't stop looking for the truth. But if he is the king and he has been told that he needs to solve this mystery, shouldn't he be searching for the truth? And so we're going to see what the difference between one of the things that he is, and by he I mean Sophocles, is looking at here is the notion of knowledge versus truth. Even on page 10, the next page, he says, "And for myself I pray, if with my knowledge he should become an inmate of my dwelling, that I may suffer all that I invoked on these just now." Well, this is a very salient passage. It says several things going on here. One, Oedipus has just told us what the punishment for being found guilty will be. You will be banished from, actually I think he says you'll be killed, right? You'll be killed, but at the very least banished. Bad things will happen to you if you get found out to be the killer. And he prays for himself that he can find out who has done this. So he wants that knowledge. So we're going to see these concepts of knowledge and truth constantly coming up. So let's move on a little bit. Again, don't want to do too much. So again, now we get Tiresias coming in. Tiresias is the blind seer who can see things. So add to your list of motifs or themes the notion of sight and seeing and what it means to have vision. Oedipus can't see throughout this play what is right in front of him. He's constantly getting clues to who it is that has done this, but he doesn't figure it out. Here we've got something interesting at the bottom of page 11 from Oedipus. "Tiresias, thou who searchest everything, communicable or nameless, both in heaven and on the earth, thou canst not see the city, but knowest no less what pestilence visits it, wherefrom our only Savior and defense we find, Sir King, in thee." So he cannot see, but he has knowledge. So vision is not always tied to knowing. Being able to see something does not mean you understand or know it. And this is ironic and happens throughout this play, is the idea that characters, especially Oedipus, doesn't see what's right in front of him. Tiresias then tells us that knowledge is not always good. This is again on page 12. "Alas, how terrible it is to know, where no good comes of knowing. Of these matters I was full well aware, but let them slip me, else I had not come hither." Later down he says, "Because I do not see thy words, not even thine going to the mark." Further down, "Ye are all unknowing. My say in any sort I will not say, lest I display thy sorrow." So again, we see knowledge is viewed as bad when it brings bad information or unwanted information. So the difference between good knowledge and bad. Shortly, we're going to see one of the biggest themes of this play. This is on page 13. We're seeing the notion of fate coming up. Tiresias says, "My offense you censure, but your own at home you see not, and yet blame me." Oedipus, "Who would not take offense, hearing the words in which you flout the city?" Tiresias, "Well, it will come, keep silence as I may." So that knowledge will show up no matter what. The truth will come out. We will find out your fate. This is the big operative word here. The biggest thing tied with the play Oedipus Rex is the notion of fate. The reason for this is because this whole play is about fate and Oedipus's inability to outrun his own fate. One of the big questions is, because remember, the way the story goes, in their attempt to circumvent the fate that was laid out for their son, Jocasta and Laius actually made it happen. Because if they hadn't tried to send him away, he would have known who his real parents were and would never have tried to kill them, presumably. I mean, we obviously don't know that, but it's because that is what's been done. Their attempt to avoid it leads them right back to it. All of the things Oedipus does lead him right back to his fate. It is inescapable. Okay, as we continue, we see these things coming up several times. On page 15, we see Oedipus's pride again. He talks on page 15 about the riddle that nobody could solve without him. He's claiming he's better than Tiresias and the other senators. Even you, Tiresias, couldn't solve the puzzle. And then even when Tiresias says Creon has not done anything wrong, Oedipus still blames him, so he refuses to listen to this man. He's very prideful. Once he's decided that Creon has somehow done something wrong, he refuses to listen to anything else. Okay, we're going to jump ahead. On page 19 here, we've got the second invocation by the, not invocation, interruption by the chorus to demonstrate a little bit of time passing. And he even says, and the chorus is acting confused here. And this is because the chorus is operating on behalf of the audience. So they say, true Zeus indeed and Apollo are wise and knowers of what concerns mankind. But that word of a seer, a man like me, weighs more than mine. For a man's prize is all unsure. Yea, one man's mind may surpass another's in subtlety, but never will I, till I see the rest, assent to those who accuse him now. Blah, 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 blah. So the chorus is just as confused as the audience might be. Now, the audience might know the story, but a first-time viewer who maybe didn't know the story would be confused. They wouldn't know who has done this yet. So the chorus does the same thing. Okay. So let's skip ahead a little bit. We'll see Oedipus loses emotional control with some amount of regularity. On page 20, we've got, tell me, by heaven, did you detect in me the bearing of a craven or a fool, that you laid plans to do it, or suppose I should not recognize your work in this, creeping on slyly and defend myself? He starts losing emotional control. He gets angry very easily. He does have a temper. And by comparison, again, as we get through this large scene between Oedipus and Creon, Creon is the calm one. You know, he goes on this long discussion and says, I didn't do this. I have no reason to have done this. And Oedipus can't be calmed down. Okay. Let's zoom forward. Here we have a big long scene. This is all the way on page 26 now. Again, I don't want to monopolize too much of your time. I know I've asked you to do lots this week. So I'm trying to jump to some important passages. We finally hear from Jocasta. And this is another moment of massive, massive irony. To Laius once there came an oracle, I do not say from Phoebus' self, but from his ministers, that so it should befall that he should die by a son's hands, whom he should have by me. And to him, the story goes, robbers abroad have murdered, at a place where 3 roads meet, while from our son's birth not 3 days went by before, with ankles pinned, he cast him out, by hands of others on a pathless moor. And so Apollo did not bring about that he should be his father's murderer, not yet that Laius should endure the stroke at his son's hands, of which he was afraid. This is what came to soothsayers' oracles, whereof take thou no heed. That which we lack, if a god seek, himself will soon reveal. So he's saying, hey look, we got away from that fate by doing this thing, but obviously we know that that's not what happened. So irony could be defined as, we know something that the players in the play do not. Alright, I want to skip further ahead onto the big reveal. Because really, a lot of what's happening in here is just the revelation is slowly coming. I will point out this is another light versus dark, way on page 35. All Jocasta says is, and yet your father's burial lets in much daylight. This is ironic. Because remember, light is usually a good thing, but the fact that Laius has been... Sorry, not Laius. Jocasta is referring to Oedipus's adopted father is now dead. The fact that that father's burial lets in much daylight. In theory, oh, look, your father was killed by... He died of natural causes, so you clearly can't be my son. This can't refer to you. Because your father suffered a different fate than the father of my child that I'm talking about. So it's supposed to be a good light, but light is not always a good thing. Okay, so we finally start getting the revelation on page 38. Jocasta figures it out first. For heaven's sake, if you care for your own life, don't seek it. I am sick and that's enough. She has figured out what is going on. She figures out the truth. And she wants to shield Oedipus from that truth. But he insists on knowing. This is the last thing that Jocasta says before she kills herself. Later on, the chorus refuses to make a guess. This is interesting. It's on page 39, number 2. The chorus asks, "Who bare thee? Which, O child, over the mountain wild sought to by Pan of the immortal maids? Or Loxias, was he the sire who fathered thee?" The chorus won't actually acknowledge what is obvious now to almost everybody, that Jocasta is Oedipus's mother. Okay, so we move on. We get the old man who did save Oedipus, and again we get characters trying to not tell him things. "Don't, master, for God's sake, don't ask me more." Oedipus gets angry, says, "Quick, someone twist his hands behind him." So Oedipus is willing to get violent, so his search for the truth is ridiculous. And then he finally figures it out. This is on page 42. "Woe, woe, it is all plain indeed. O light, this be the last time I shall gaze on thee, who am revered to have been born of those of whom I ought not, to have wedded whom I ought not, and slain whom I might not slay." So light, again, light is bad. Light is not good. Now, what we're getting in the chorus that comes after this is commentary. Okay? Look at, for example, Roman numeral 2, number 2. "Time found thee out, time who sees everything, unwittingly guilty, and arraigns thee now, consort ill-sorted, to whom are bred sons of thy getting in thine own birthbed." You can't run away from fate. Time here also means fate. Fate sees everything. Fate knows everything. Fate can't be changed. Okay? Then we've got, on the next page, 44, Jocasta has killed herself. This is just a messenger sort of wrapping up loose ends, okay? Oedipus has poked out his eyes with Jocasta's own pins. And of course, we should see this as ironic, right? This is where we're tying some of our ironies together. We've got Oedipus finally, quote-unquote, seeing the light. The truth has come out. And in response, he blinds himself. So the truth brings only darkness as opposed to light. So the truth has very negative connotations here. And so, of course, Oedipus has to blind himself. Once he knows the truth, he can no longer see. During his search, when he was not blind, metaphorically, he couldn't see. He couldn't see what was right in front of him. Now that he sees the truth, he is blind. This is the utmost irony. Okay. Just a couple more things I want to point out. In his last big speech that starts on page 48, Oedipus, and this is the other thing with his vision. He doesn't want to see the results of his terrible action. He's still hiding from truth, from knowledge. So, he says, "I have sinned sins worse than a halter's need. Or do you think that children were a sight delectable for me to gaze at, born as they were born? Never with eyes of mine. No, nor the city, nor the citadel, nor consecrated shrines of deities, from which, to my most utter misery, I, of all other men and thieves, the man most bravely nurtured, cut myself away." He doesn't want to see the things that he's done. He is going to live, and he's going to force himself into banishment. Later on page 51, he asks Creon to send him away. He's going to go where he needs to go, to Cithaeron mountains, which my mother and my sire, living, appointed for my sepulchre. That, as they meant my slayers, I may expire. So he's going to the mountain where he was supposed to be killed as a baby. So it's sort of his story coming full circle. And also notice that now that he's blind, he's a much kinder person. On page 52, he says, "Children dear, where are you? Come hither to my arms, to these brotherly arms. Procures that the eyes that were your sire's, once bright, should see thus." He's starting to be nice to them. Now that he can't see, he decides to be kind. His lack of vision makes him a kinder man. Okay. So that's what's happened to Oedipus here. So just to review very briefly, things that you should take away from this play. Again, Sophocles knows the story already, and he just wants to make you think about irony. Obviously, the irony of the search for truth. Oedipus wants to know the truth, but it's a terrible truth. light and dark. He is constantly looking to be enlightened, to have the vision to see what's not been revealed to him, to see the truth. But the greatest irony, obviously, is that the truth is dark, and it's bad and terrible, and that when he finally sees the truth, he blinds himself. And then only when he's blind, he has gained knowledge. Obviously, also the idea of running away from fate. You can never escape your fate. We're going to see this trend throughout the rest of all of the mythology we read, this idea of a fate that is inevitable. And there is no story that captures this notion more so than the story of Oedipus Rex. Okay, with that, I will see you all next week. What we'll be doing in the audio lecture for the remaining plays is those will be fairly brief. There's going to be a PowerPoint on the three of them that identifies some passages and the themes that they're related to. But I'll just have a few quick things to say about all three of them. That should be, despite being about 3 plays, that lecture should be no longer than this one was. Okay, well, thank you guys for listening, and see you at the next lecture.